Sorry, it's having a little moment.
No
Yeah,
problem.
there it goes. There you go. You're good.
Thank you. All right. Welcome everyone to the 2024 special meeting of the MCS Board of Directors for, June 28th, 2024. This is meetings generally set up for our budget, proposed budget and budget approval. A couple things got added late in the game. We already saw the OSBA training topics that were in there, but we got some fencing quotes back. And then we also need to discuss briefly just some future meeting dates, at least one, so that we can then have our next meeting and then set up for the whole year's meetings after that. So I'm going to share my screen with an agenda that's been edited just to walk ourselves down the line here. We have not received any pre-submitted public comments. And so I'll just share this changed agenda here. Okay. Please speak up if you have any questions. You all just about a half hour ago received some fencing quotes in your emails. And that'll be a discussion topic today after the board budget presentation. Does anyone have any questions about the amended agenda prior to me making a motion to approve it? Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the amended agenda as presented. Can I get a second? Thanks, Avelia. All those in favor? Any opposed, please voice your opposition. Motion passes. Okay, so for item number 4, the proposed budget, I have a little presentation to show, and then we have Veronica here. Thank you, Veronica, for making time today to answer any questions that are more specific than anything that if I'm not able to answer it. So this set up. Can everyone see the slideshow here on the screen? I can't see everyone, so if you can't, please just speak up. So we've all received the initial budget draft, and it shows our major sources of school income, which are the $2.3 million from the state school fund. That's based on an enrollment of 170 students. In years past, we even based our enrollment on 180 and had a reconciliation that basically took effect every 2 years to pay back if we're over or under. Our other revenue sources, as you saw, were SAA grant and early literacy. This year's budget includes a holdback of $33,508 from 2 years ago. Here's a comparison of the two last year's and this year's budgets. And this is to walk you through kind of how we receive our money. And sorry, 1 second here. It's going to be a while. Can you give me a minute? Okay, I'm on it right now. So we have 23-24 on the left. It shows our base rate of 97.27. And these are per student rates. And then on the right, we have our 24-25. And it's adjusted, I can't see that part of it, but it's 10,000 something. And so those are just adjusted rates that come from the state. And then we have all these qualifiers that basically adjust up and down: our poverty rate, the ESL adjustment, and then they have these computational factors down below that show the number of students we project to have in our classes, and then some other adjustments to arrive at a final projected ADMW down below here, which gets us to where our budget is. And then we have any adjustments. So last year you saw a $22,000 adjustment. This year's a $30,000+ adjustment. And that happens every 2 years. They look back and see how much money or how many students do we actually have based on what we were projected to have. and there's an adjustment to our budget. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. So here's the proposed budget. And this, sorry, 1 second here. This shows up, so we have student fees in the form of anticipated funding from preschool. The earnings on investments is just interest earnings from the money we have in our long-term accounts. Does anyone have any questions about any of the numbers they're seeing here? The one that stands out obviously is the 147,000. 147,000 the loss we have in the food services fund. And I think there's more information that we'll gain there in the future about exactly where our funding is on that. I think there's more that comes in that we're not aware of at the moment. As you all know, we're still auditing and reconciling last year's. And so there are a few things that'll become clearer for us in the budget picture. But the funding from the state's clear, our account balances are clear. The things that we, base those things off of are very clear. This ends up with about a $40,000 left over at the end of the year. I think that will end up probably moving on to what we reserve in for our student reserve fund when we give money back and we don't have enough money in the budget, or when we have the students that don't meet our expected enrollment numbers, is where I think that will end up going. Veronica, if I speak out of turn on any of this, please correct me.
Yeah, no, everything's been spot on so far, Dan.
Okay. So generally we have our largest expense is salaries. And so if you look down below, salaries and payroll costs together, if you look towards the right, take up a majority of that budget that we get from the state. The other sources you see there, the SIA and the literacy help, and some of our staffing is covered through D21 as well in that holdback. We have increased some of our supplies and material costs this year. One of the concerns over the last year to this year was that teachers were either restricted from or had to fund some more of their supplies in their classrooms. And that's one of the things I really think we should eliminate. The teachers shouldn't have to use their own money to supply their classroom with the needed materials they have. So Michelle's worked to increase that budget. There may be some additional, we're looking to change our printer to a color printer, which may incur more costs through Pacific Office Automation, whom we have a contract with. So there's a few changes that this proposed budget may change a little bit as we move into the next couple of months, if things like that come up and we have a clearer picture. But generally it will look like this. Here's our current fund balance. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just a quick note too, Dan, if you go back to the last slide. So two things that you'll notice is that there's no ESSER funding for this coming year because that will have been completed. And then also you'll see that the DOE, Department of Energy grant, once those numbers are more finalized, we'll do a adjustment or a reconciliation point at that to add those numbers on. But it should just be a direct in and out, essentially. So we'll add the DOE funds and then they will all be spent towards that capital outlay.
Correct. Yeah, and there will be some, in this next slide I'll show you here, we have a building fund balance of around $480,000, and the majority of that building fund balance will be used up in this DOE grant process. We have to do a not matching funds, but we have to provide some of our own funding for that grant, and that's where that generally will come from. It's been put aside for that kind of work. That's why it's in a building fund. So while it is spending quite a bit of money, it's for the right reasons. It's for the building and for upgrading our systems. And in the long term, I can't say that it's going to save all that back, but we do spend a ton of money on diesel every single year. And it just, it's very inefficient. So the long term is that we'll have a much more efficient building with modernized systems. The ending balance from 23-24 is projected to be around $200,000. We have a restricted fund balance. Part of that is holdbacks that we have set aside for paybacks to that 30, like the 33,000 or 34,000 that we're paying this year back to the district for the fact that we did not have enrollment at the same level we thought it would be 2 years ago. This money is set aside for enrollment for last year that we'll pay back next year. And some of that ending fund balance from 23-24 will get put into that account, and the rest, I believe, will be spent on or go to building fund and other facilities upgrades and funds that we'll have to be using. Any questions on these? The investment fund account is money we have set aside that earns interest. When you see that interest earned on the last slide in the budget, that's coming from that account and the building fund. So some changes, just so you're aware of. We've reduced our estimate from 180 to 170 to align more clearly with what we think the enrollment will be. Currently, it's, I believe, 164. Michelle, I think 163. We'll have an increase in student fees from a projected increase in preschool numbers and the expectation that that program funds itself. Like Veronica said earlier, we have a sunset of the ESSER funds. We do not currently show our DOE grant and associated commitments there. We have, like I said earlier, an increase in enrollment from last year. We finished out with 153, I believe. So far, we're looking like about a 10+ student enrollment increase. Going forward, also, we have systems set up with Veronica and Summer, so there's going to be the accounting process will be easier, and the audit process in the future, which we do every year, will be easier and not require so much work. This budgeting takes into account a COLA increase of 4% for all staff and a change in benefits with minimal projected net financial adjustments. And that's the end of that slide. Any questions? Does the budget, for everyone on here, for board members, do you feel that you understand the general overview of the budget that we have so far? And if anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to ask. I feel like in our board training, our OSBA board training, more budget work could help. It's one of those things that you see it a lot. If you see it enough times, you see all the line items and you realize kind of what. Go ahead, Julia.
Sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to cut you off. One question I have is that we almost always have some kind of unexpected expense. That's sort of one of the things I've observed is that, maybe whatever it is, whether it's a facility expense, or something breaks unexpectedly, or I don't know, we need a new hire for something, but where is the wiggle room? Let's say, for example, Marie and I are working on this project of transportation, and we can come up with a proposal so we could start a half an hour or an hour later, which would be a lot easier for our families in the Dalles, but it's going to have a transportation related cost. Do we have a sense of like, this budget has $5K of wiggle room, this budget has $20K of wiggle room, so like that $40K that's extra might be able to be assigned to something? That would be really helpful for me to understand just how tight it is, because not just for the projects that I'm aware of, but also for unexpected events. Where would we draw those funds from, and kind of how much do we have in this sort of savings?
Yeah, so, and Veronica, please step in if you want to, but we have around $2.2 million in savings, right? Some of those things are set aside, like the $400,000+ that's set aside for a building reserve. We are ending this year with money left over, but that also is money that we have set aside for the payback due to the fact that this last year we had 150 some odd students and we projected to have 180. So it's every 10 students is $100,000 basically. And so if we are 30 students under, for just general terms, we're $300,000 that we'll owe back, right? And so we have money in that account already. The point, what we had always talked about in the past was trying to make sure we spend this year's dollars on this year's students. And so there is money in reserve funds, but the point is that when we get $2.3 million from the state this year, is to spend $2.3 million on this year's students to make sure that they get the education that they need, that we do the most we can. And most of that comes in the form of salaries. With that, we do have reserve funds for things that when we think about the budget long term, if we're going to look at doing something differently, it has to work out year in, year out for the future. So if we change transportation or some other thing and it ends up adjusting our budget by 30 or 40 or $50,000, that has to be an expense that we can absorb long term. Veronica, do you want to add any more to that?
Yeah, so kind of specifically for this year's budget, you'll notice on the bottom line too, that there's an other expense of about $42,000. And that is set aside for unallocated, unanticipated, kind of a contingency fund, right? So that would be also, if we did have something that changed for this year, we provided that extra cushion of about $42,000. And then there's also a small cushion within our salary expenses as well for additional hires. There had been talk of maybe a music teacher or some additional education assistants. So we did try to buffer that salary budget as well appropriately for one or two staff positions as well.
And we were also very conservative on the preschool, just because it's been a slow enrollment. So potentially that's more money, but right now we're being very conservative. So.
That's good to know. Do we have the fence budgeted in around the middle school? Because I know that's a big ticket item.
And were you using, I thought you were using ESSER funds for that, but maybe I'm wrong. Yes, I think ESSER, that's going to come out of ESSER. So we have this like $300,000 worth of ESSER funds that we need to spend before September 30th. And then they go away. So we want to spend every nickel of that money. So, and we're kind of trying to be a little bit creative about it because that does need to be, we just need to, we're working on having that spent.
Yes. So the projects that had originally been slotted for ESSER funds, we found that not all of those may qualify due to some prevailing wage differences between the federal and the state prevailing wages. So we have shifted that a little bit. And now the fence project would be one that'll be included under the ESSER 3 funds for that.
Because when they budget, so the bids, it is for prevailing wage. We can also revise it. And so we've kind of, we met with Tam, I think it was, from ODE to talk about how to properly get as much out as we can out of the ESSER funds. And so we may kind of revise it just a little bit so that we are spending all that down. And so I feel like you're also going to see some of our money freed up a little bit from this year, from the budget too.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say the exact same thing. This is really, really helpful to see. So thank you, Veronica and Michelle, for putting it together, and Dan. And then I also just want to say, hi, Veronica. So happy to have you here. And you've been so helpful for us all. So appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Marie.
Yeah, I just want to say it was really nice to receive all this information, and it just looks like it's very thought through, and what a relief. Yeah, it seems like the school is in a good financial place. From the news I've been reading about other school districts and schools, I think this is looking really good, considering. So thanks everybody who worked super, super hard. And Veronica, so glad you're staying on.
Very excited to work with you guys. It's been a joy.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Marie and Veronica.
Could I just add on that? I had the exact same feeling, Marie. Like, this makes me feel very comfortable when I look at it, because it looks like a good amount of money to have set aside. And that, from what I can tell, some smart decisions have been made in the past to set us up for where we are right now. And I really know very little about budgeting, especially with like numbers like this. And so I just would like to hear from like Avelia and Veronica and others who have more awareness of this type of budgeting in general. if you all feel the same like sense of security and optimism that I'm getting.
I'll go ahead and add that in the past, decisions have really set us up. We did a lot of safety upgrades, and were completed, but those were all expenses that were funds that were set aside. And even though we made huge investments and we approved as a board a lot of other expenditures, we still came out with a net amount that isn't necessarily going to our reserve, but it's at least putting us in the right position of still having our savings funds, and also the ability to pay back with the low enrollment we had this year. So we kept, even with all the changes and all the expenditures, we really kept everything on financially. It wasn't as impactful. It was pretty steady as it has been in the last couple of years.
On that note, in the past, we've generally put a little bit of money in each budget into the reserve fund to try and keep that where it is. And you know, Thad was, you know, I think back 3 or 4 years ago, he may have put $100,000 into the reserve fund one of those years. The Thad's process and the past board processes have been to be very conservative with our money so that we can come to years like this next year and know that we're going to spend money, a sizable amount of money on our facility. And that's an investment in next year's students and future students that, you know, I think is important that we do. And that's part of why we have that reserve fund. But as we keep going forward, we know we're spending all this money this year. I would just caution all of us to be careful on how much we do spend additionally. Like there, you know, it seems like a lot of money. It's great to have a 1 year's operating income in reserve, but let's work in the next few years to also try and work on building that back up again, or at least have a plan in place to build back what we do spend down, while without taking away from the students, you know, the educational experience.
And I do want to say, like, that is true, but I walked through the building with John from our insurance company, Pace, and the building definitely needs some attention. And I mean, there's gaping holes in different places. There's safety hazards, so we may have to spend a bit of money and to get the building up and where it needs to be so that it can be used for the next 10 or 20 years, so, or longer. It's a 100-year-old building. Yeah, so.
Yeah, certainly. Any other budget questions before we look to make a motion and approve the budget as seen, as presented?
Oh, I had a question. I don't want to, you know, take up too much time, but I was curious, Veronica, Michelle, do you have any notion of how the poverty rate is calculated? Because I noticed that it went down, which I thought, well, that's positive because the funding also increased per student. I also know, you know, everything's increased in cost as well. I was wondering if anyone knew how that rate was calculated.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do not know how that's calculated. That comes from the district. But I can definitely follow up with Randy and see if we can get a better idea of how, like, some of the factors that they use for that.
Yeah, and we have kind of learned this year, Veronica and I, is to really look at that document carefully. Because the original one they sent over had us at 83% instead of 89%. That was a $70,000 swing in what we owed them. So I think that we just need to be very mindful and really watching things like that. So.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'll make a motion that we approve the 2024-25 school budget as drafted and presented. Can I get a second? Thank you, Velia. All those in favor? Any opposed, please voice your opposition. Motion passes. The 24-25 budget has been approved. Congratulations. That brings us to item number 5, which is our fencing quotes. Michelle, do you want to take the lead on this? And I can, but I'll post the quotes on the screen.
I can just tell you what Don told me. Anyway, so our hope was to have 3 bids. The original person that did the fence that you see, she has tried to contact them several times and they have just not returned any phone calls. We haven't heard anything. So we're just kind of assuming they don't want to do a bid on that. So we're counting that as a bid. The other 2, Rick's Custom Fence, and then I think it's farm something. I can't remember the name of it. So farm fencing or something. Anyway, it seemed like theirs was pretty high. Dawn felt most comfortable with Rick's Custom Fence. They believe like we can, Dawn is like, please get this on the board agenda because if we can get this approved, Rick's Custom Fence can probably begin this within probably 3 to 4 weeks. They can get somebody on it. So, I mean, our goal is to have it before school. There's 2 bids that you see. One is it has to do with the easements and how that is handled. I'm pretty sure that we're not going to have a solution to the easement. So my guess is I would just plan for the higher bid because it's going to be more cost when we're including the easement on there. And it's kind of a safety issue for kids because the person does use that quite quickly through there. And so I think there's what I'm understanding is that you're kind of putting a gate there and then you have to have another gate. And so that's why the increase of cost. But Don felt pretty, I guess Rick's Custom Fencing talked with the manufacturer of the fence and they're going to get a deal. If they were going to give them the fencing at a discount rate. And it all seemed too good to be true. So anyway, but Rick's Custom Fencing is a pretty well known, I guess, in the Portland area, but I mean, that's all they do are fencing. So
Have you all had a chance to look at those bids? Would you like me to pull them up on screen, or at least the highest one that we're talking about, Rick's? Here we go. Yes, you want to see it, or yes, you had a chance to see. Oh, Avelia, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. So first, I saw that the farm one had in the quote saying that it had prevailing wage embedded to it, but I don't see anything that specifies that on Rick's. I guess I'm just concerned if they're looking at it in the prevailing wage.
On page 2 of Rick's. Here, let me show it.
I might have missed it then.
So page 2 shows, and this is page 2, the
Oh
labor
yeah,
install.
prevailing wage included. Yes.
So we have that covered.
Perfect. Great. Okay, and then if I'm reading this right, it's because I didn't see it. I did see that Rick's and Farm had 2 different height for the fencing, correct?
I didn't catch that part of it. This one looks like 6 feet high.
Yeah, I saw Rick's is 6, but I think Farms has 4 feet high.
Okay.
Yeah. Just as a comment in general, but the pricing is quite a difference.
I think 6 matches what we already have around the perimeter.
Yeah, I don't see it called. I see the gates on the farm one called out at 4 feet, but I don't see the height of the rest of it called out.
Yeah, I think
you want to match
they
what we
have
are.
it in inches. Yeah.
I didn't have time before to look at either. Could you put the other one up real quick too? Sorry.
Certainly.
Thank you.
By the front door. So here's farm. It has the double gates, so it's comparable to the first quote, the higher quote from Rick's. The walking gates. It notes that prevailing wage is also included. So it's a little bit less detailed from what I can tell. Let's see here. Here we go. These are just the conditions at the very end here. So the actual bid part here has less detail than the one from Rick's. And I can't, when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see everybody. So if you have questions, please either just speak up or raise your hand.
Yeah, so I guess I'm confused why they would do 4-foot gates if the fence is 6 foot. Maybe we should double check that the height of that one. I mean, I guess it's the costlier one anyway, so.
Right. And Dawn, let me share the other one. Did you see? I'll share the Rick's one real quick again. See that. This will just have more of it called out. This is the first page. The gates, the access gates are 6 feet high on this one. The people gates. So this closely matches what we already have. It has the panic bars, which are used on our other gates that we already have installed. The same brand of fencing.
I know I looked at it earlier, but I might have, and I might be missing it now again, but do you know if Rick's included any possible jackhammering through the concrete cost or anything like that for this fencing?
I don't see that called out, but it does show the labor.
There's labor to
All post here at 13,000.
Yeah, I think just thinking conserve, I guess it would just be a good question to ask to make sure, is this all included with any possible jackhammer? I know that estimates are due to change, but I guess I just want to make sure that some of the things were thought of and versus expecting now a much larger end up cost.
Well, I mean, they did come on site and look at what they needed to install, so I'm gonna kind of assume they did
Yeah,
that.
and
in their
I
labor.
think I'm not trying to, but I think with contractors, it's always better to make sure and have that clarity versus just assuming, because it can be a very it could be a price difference.
I think in the past I've noticed Dawn to be quite detail oriented when she talks to contractors, and so I hear what you're saying, Avelia. It doesn't concern me as much with her though, because she's usually on top of it with these kinds of questions.
And so, I'm sorry, I don't remember who said this. Maybe Michelle said this, that the expectation is that we will use ESSER funds on this.
Yeah. So of that 300,000+ that's left over, this would be one of the things that would be used on. And there are restrictions on how you use it. So the fact that this has prevailing wage, has those tips out to bid, helps us meet those restrictions so that we can use up some of that funding there. And then Veronica and Michelle have a plan for the rest of it.
Yeah, and ESSER funds were meant for to address loss of learning or safety. And this is definitely a safety issue, so.
if I recall, the fencing around the school, I believe was around $50,000.
Mhm.
And I know that was reduced, thanks to the generosity of the contractor and the supplier, I believe. I think that if this contractor is ready to begin in 3 to 4 weeks, I mean, the idea of having it done before the school begins just, it would really increase the security of the campus. So I feel comfortable moving forward, and Don has worked with the last fencing company and is well versed in fencing, I believe, at this point. And if hopefully there won't be any change orders. I don't know if it's possible for us to approve without. I don't know if you can do that. Say that this would be a fixed sum. I don't know, Valia, Dan.
There were no adjustments in the last one, when they came and they bid it out. And then there weren't, to my knowledge and my recollection, there weren't any adjustments on our last bid for fencing. So I think it's fairly straightforward. What they're going to do is there's not very many complicating factors. They aren't really involving any other systems from our school or digging into anything or remodeling anything. They're just putting in a fence. So I don't see major opportunities for change orders in this bid.
Just a quick note too, in order to use the ESSER funds, one little piece too, is that the project either has to be fully under contract and underway, or there has to be just this clear sense of obligation that those funds are spent for that by September 30th. So that's just something else to keep in mind, is that we are trying to get this wrapped up before school starts, ideally before September, to make sure that those funds can be used for the ESSER grants. Just a little piece.
Certainly. Thank you, Veronica.
Let's do it.
Any other fencing questions?
This doesn't have to do with the bids for the fencing, but I'm just concerned and curious because I remember when I wasn't a board member last year talking with the school about the private individual that enjoys the access through the school's campus. What's like that protocol look like for the use there and the fence and the gate and how they get locked and unlocked and all of that?
Well, easement is access, it's not ownership. And so there's access and there's access rules. And so there'll be rules set forth with Michelle and Dawn about how that will be used. And if those aren't followed, then we'll follow up with that afterwards.
Okay.
There'll be protocols in place for the safety of the students and how that can be used.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on fencing? Julia, anything? Okay. All right. Are we prepared to vote then on this, the fence quotes? All right, let me look at the quote again so I make sure I say it right. I make a motion that we approve Rick's Custom Fencing and Decking's estimate number 567069.
I'll second that.
For installation of fence around our middle
Oh.
school. Second, thank you, Tiffany. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes, thank you. Too many windows open here. All right, that brings us to item number 6, which is OSBA board training topics with Marie.
Dan, just because
Oh yeah, go ahead.
sometimes I worry about loose ends, so somebody will communicate that to Dawn, and then Dawn will be the one to move forward with it. Cool. Michelle, awesome. Thank you.
Marie.
Gotta text her right now.
Are you going to need the minutes right away for this, or is verbal enough, right?
I think verbal.
To get the ball rolling on the fencing. Yeah. Okay.
So we have our next board training set for July 23rd. That's a work day for me. It's not a big deal. I just will be in and out as calls come in. But Marie, you have some board training topics.
Well, I also will not be available on July 23rd. So I just want to set up the training with Kristen Miles for everyone who will be attending and relay to her what members would like to review.
I think what both you and Emily have been working on onboarding for new members. Is that correct? Or at least that's a focus that we look to add for Tiffany and also for all of us, just to, kind of cover kind of all that we do, whether it's the scheduling, the setting of meetings, the budgeting, and kind of our yearly calendar so that we're all aware of what takes place when. And I know that was part of what we wanted to talk about. Is there anything else? Everyone can speak up. Is there anything else we want to cover in our next training? We talk about it rather than having a hard copy binder, there'd be a section of the board on the website that just you can reference for any pertinent information that want to relate back to for any questions that new people may have or existing board members have. Am I on the right track there, Marie?
I never received a board folder myself, so I would love to help scan those documents. I started an email with some links, and my thought was that to it I could add scanned documents from the MCS Board of Directors folder, and I'd be happy to, borrow it and scan items and then try to just collate everything into an email.
It's always used like kind of our bylaws, things that are available on the website, and then out of the stuff that's in there is all out of date. It was old contracts, old budgets, things like that are kind of the nuts and bolts of what we do. So I'll dig up an old one and we can build something off that.
And Marie, I saw the email materials you put together, and I think it's really, really helpful, and I appreciate that a lot. Are you thinking, Dan, that we would incorporate that into the OSPA training?
We can. I just want to make sure we cover whatever's where we're at as a board, whatever people feel like they need. So if that's stuff that we want to cover, that's great. If more budget discussion is when we want, wherever we feel like we have a need, let's cover that part of it. Use that training time, gain Kristen's knowledge, and just come away as more prepared to tackle the next year. I like, having an idea of what are like either quarterly or what the actions the board's going to need to take kind of on a quarterly basis. So you're looking ahead and saying, okay, I expect these things to happen in the next 3 months. These are what I'm expected to do. It's like we know, for example, next year is going to be a bargaining year. So setting up early who that bargaining team is going to be. It's going to start in March or earlier. And, so there's a lot of things. In addition, we have Michelle here now who has more experience and has seen the way things run at other schools. And so that we can say, okay, well, here's maybe how we've done it traditionally, but here's maybe a better way to do it. So, I'd like to try and take the institutional knowledge we currently have, but also the knowledge of, that we have now in our group with Veronica, Michelle, and everybody here, that we can do a better job in the years to come and streamline kind of the process that we already use. Just because we've done something a certain way doesn't mean it's right. There's all sorts of suggestions, from Michelle's point of view on the way she's seen other boards work and things that, either technology that we can use or other things that we can do that may streamline the process and make it easier for all of us.
Great,
So,
yeah. I like all of that. Other things that I think, Marie, would be helpful, and maybe these are just like maybe we can kind of do a smorgasbord from Kristen, because I think it's always great to be reminded of the public meeting rules and regulations. And I did see that you sent another training that's coming up on that too, so thank you. But I feel like you never can hear it enough. And then also, I don't know if she would have anything to share out on charter school fundraising, but that could be something that would be helpful for us to get educated on.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I think it'll be Tiffany's first OSBA training. So I've already let Kristen Miles know that we have a new board member. So I think, you know, just a recap of basic roles and responsibilities is something that she can go over. And then I think Emily, 100%, we can never hear enough about public meeting law. And I can ask her about the charter school funding. And I will continue as best as I can to put together the onboarding materials. And, you know, I would love to get that all squared away by this fall. And I'll keep sending out little emails when I can about free webinars that come up through OSBA, because they're free. And in fact, on the portals that we have access to OSBA, it's possible to watch any of their past webinars. So if anybody feels like they need a refresher or they need to know more about something, I would encourage everyone to go to the OSBA portal and check out the webinars. They're super informative. And then PACE has its own set of webinars as well. And I'll just, anytime anybody feels that they would like more information on something, feel free to email me. I can, you know, look up the link, send it to you, try to help make things easy to access. And thanks to everyone for your patience with the onboarding materials. I am committed to it, but it won't happen quickly. Just because of my personal life and obligations at the moment, but I would like to have everything together this fall.
Thank you for doing
Possible, maybe just a brief policy update schedule, whatever Kristen kind of suggests in that point of view. Like, you know, we know they're updated at certain points along the year, but I'd like to be able to set our own policy update schedule where we're going to, you know, just knock that off every quarter or something like that, so we can just stay on top of it, so we don't get this big backlog of policies. Any other discussion on board training topics for Marie or anybody here?
Dan, oh, sorry, go ahead, Julian.
I was actually just going to talk bigger picture calendar. So if you have a board training question, go for it.
I was just gonna make sure that enough folks can be there, because we heard from Marie and Dan might be called out. Do we have, I mean, because it costs money, right, to have these trainings, so it's good to make sure we have enough board member minds there to be worth the cost.
Maybe after this meeting, we just send out a poll and make sure that a majority of the board can be there.
Great.
That's good.
And then I can also, I'll send out an email and ask for feedback on time for July 23rd. Kristen Miles seems to be fairly flexible on that day. So for folks that can't attend, it would be helpful to know what time would be best for everybody.
Right. Can I close this out, Julie, and we can talk about calendar? Okay, if there's no more discussion on the board training topics, I'll move us to the next topic, which is general meeting dates, and that also aligns with calendar. Okay, item number 7, our next general meeting. There's been some friction in the past on whether or not we have a July meeting. I think we have enough going on. We probably should have a July meeting, a regular meeting. We want to postpone it till later in July. I'm okay with that. We could even have it tied in with the board training if we want to. As long as there's nothing that, Michelle, you feel like we'll need to address early on in July.
Not that I know of.
And for Julia, about the general calendar, I have a rough draft started on just some meeting dates for this next school year. Do you want to work with me on setting that calendar and getting something out in a rough draft format? And then we can bring it to the next board meeting and have, or even in between, have other board members weigh in on it so we can have a discussion at the next board meeting about that. Make sure we hit all of our goals. It'll involve Michelle as well. We'll have, you know, ED evaluation on there. There's a few things we need to make sure, the benchmarks we need to hit.
Yeah, and I had a question about just, you know, our strategic plan being out of date and some of the things Michelle has raised, an interest in kind of creating something we've all talked about for a while pre-Michelle is having kind of a vision for the school, and I think that will help with marketing and recruiting kids, a longer term vision that's updated. And then also a discussion around technology, which just seems to be rising up in a lot of different places, and a conversation about our school's relationship with technology, and you know, are we in a place we're happy with, and how do we kind of figure that out and navigate it, which I think could be wrapped into the strategic planning. But we have in the past done kind of a workshop style day, and I wonder if there's space for that in July, where we can kind of brainstorm some of these things. And there's other things to talk about. I don't know if there's been a final decision on the security guard going forward and safety, but that seems like also ripe for reflection. Anyway, I would love, you know, we often in this don't have like kind of a space for this kind of creative and free roaming and visioning, because we're just tackling like the must-dos of getting the budget, getting the audit, you know, new hires, finding an ED. And I feel like we're in a good moment to take a breath and think in that strategic way. And I'm curious for reactions from Michelle too, if that feels right.
Well, Veronica and I have actually been talking about calendar. Funny you say that. We're kind of like working on that. Like, what are the things that we need done, you know, throughout the year, the months. I think having a workshop would be really great to do sometime in July or early August. I'm open for whatever you want to do, but sitting down and talking about that calendar. Hold on just a second. Anyway, I had a meeting with Brent Foster, but at noon, but I didn't hear from him. I tried to call him and I was just trying to call. So just kind of like setting up just what we were talking about. And like the technology thing, that policy, I looked at our policy for technology. There's no mention of cell phones for kids. It's MP3 players. And it is so out of date, is like looking at what policies that we need to tackle. And, you know, like some of them probably have more impact that we need to tackle before, and making a schedule for those policies. And I know you did a big chunk of them last year, but that one hasn't been updated. It says 2016, unless somehow that was in there and I didn't see that. So, I think I just think like maybe even if we could find 4 hours that we could meet and I think in person would be better. So we have a kind of imagining like a whiteboard, we can kind of do some brainstorming and really get that laid out, you know, where we're going to do that work. So.
Great ideas.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I think we should do that. July and August being summer are very busy, probably for most people. So trying to find times may be a challenge. Do we want to try and hash that out right now, or do we want to do an email back and forth and figure out times that work for everyone after the meeting?
Well, we don't have all of our folks here right now, so it might be worth trying to do it on email, even if though that's hard.
Let's do that.
And I do have a newsletter that I'm trying to send out on Monday. So it would be nice to know. So if we are going to have a July meeting, I was hoping to put that in the newsletter for families. Sadly, because they don't, I've been talking with Stan from the North Wasco and Power Schools. They don't actually make the changeover till July 12th for the new families. So I'm attempting to send an email out to all the families except for the 8th grade families, because they don't really probably care too much about what we're doing, and then trying to figure out getting the kindergartners on there. And that letter so knowing like when the next board meeting is would be nice to put into that newsletter.
Second week in July, I
Okay.
work the 9th. If we're gonna have a meeting prior to the 23rd, the 10th is an option for me.
And I mean, we don't necessarily need to have a meeting in July. If you're just going to keep the meetings the second Tuesday, I can just put the August meeting in there.
That would be the 13th of August. So I'm fine doing that as long as we don't have any pressing issues that we need to vote on, prior to that. So whether it's I think if any staffing issues come up, we can vote on those in August. That works. We seem to have the facility stuff figured out. The only thing I can think of is if anything for ESSER that needs a vote. I think everyone's aware of what we're, trying to capture those ESSER dollars before the end of September. So that potentially could be something we handle in August as well. And do any other board members have any feelings on that? July? We are having a training, which is a meeting, but it's not a general meeting. Julia?
My preference would just be if we go to August, that we maybe do it the first week of August, that we do it early in August. There may be something on transportation. I don't know how much Marie and I will figure out, but I would want to give folks a big heads up if there's any changes at all to transportation. Yeah, my sense is just once we hit August, things move so fast. All of a sudden, the kids are in the building and we're going. So it makes me a little nervous to push it to August, but I'm okay with like last week of July or first week of August. But I think getting into the middle of the month, the teachers are there like a week later, and it's just it just feels like it goes so fast.
Well, we can always have the July 23rd OSBA meeting have an addition, there's space there in that agenda to tackle any issues that come up. And then,
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that too, is having it a OSBA training plus voting, potentially adding to that agenda. I know Marie's traveling.
okay.
Michelle and Veronica, you all have been thinking about those ESSER funds. Do you anticipate needing anything from us sooner than later, other than the fencing piece?
It would be mainly on if you wanted to review the final allocations that we would submit for ESSER funds. So depending on your feelings of that's what I anticipate having done, is submitted those allocation request adjustments before August.
And I don't know that that's something you actually have to vote on, because that's not something I'm used to seeing, at least at Corbett. I mean, we have here's our ESSER funds. It's not necessarily something a board has to vote on because you already have accepted the ESSER funds. So, but there will be some revision just so that we can make sure after our meeting with Tam, we just decided to make some revisions so that we know that the allocation or what we're submitting for is kosher with them, meets all their debt, because you're dealing with federal government on that. So
yeah, and it shouldn't include any new projects other than the fencing that you guys just spoke on. So there shouldn't be anything new that would need that kind of an approval. It's just shifting to make sure we can capture those funds fully.
Right, and it might be shifting funds that we've already spent on people. Because people are really, what we were told by Tam, people and curriculum are the easiest things for us to submit for. They're the ones that are like low, you know, we're not gonna get scrutinized very hard for that, so. Where projects, we're going to.
And I'd second what Michelle said there. It's like, that's not really, it's kind of past our job really to scrutinize every one of those things. We're just wanting to make sure that, you know, the ESSER funds are already accept the fact that we're going to use them has been accepted by the board. We just want to make sure they do get used. And then it's going to be being aware of the fact that they got used up, and so I don't see a need for us to vote on that either. So currently we have, go ahead, Tiffany.
I was just gonna say, I do want to echo Julia's concern about not waiting too late. I think that's a good idea to get that meeting sooner than later.
That reminds me of an agenda item that we'll need to do. Julie and I are wrapping up work with the MTA on the contract changes. And so we'll need to get those in front of everyone in July.
Okay. As those things come up, will you send me an email so that I can make sure I include it in the agenda ahead of time? Any supporting documents that we may have, like it always seems to come in at the last minute, and I want you to all have as much time as possible to review whatever we get. But so far what I have is we have a July 23rd OSBA training with a meeting added onto it for any pertinent information. After that, July 23rd, we can either have the next meeting the first or second week in August. Julia, do you have a feeling on, would you like to have that still in the first week? That would be August 6th, I believe. Just to be ahead of it. And then the next one would be September, early September, the second week probably.
I'm happy for others to weigh in. I don't feel strongly about whether, if we're gonna meet July 23rd, whether it's the first week or the second, but.
Maybe having it the second week allows us to have more time if some other changes come up, or we capture something more before the late September or the next month.
I defer to others. I could go either way.
I'm not available on the 13th of August because of a work trip, and that's okay. The one thing I would say is if that meeting is going to be kind of our workshop meeting, I would want to be there. But it sounds like that might be two different. Those might be two different sessions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, a lot of times you can do your workshop, right before I mean, like, just because it seems like, adding more days is harder. You could make it like you could do the workshop a couple hours before the meeting. And it's a public, when you do a workshop, it has to be public. So you just announce it as a public meeting, and then you could take a break. And if everybody wants to go home and meet online, that's fine too. So, but I guess, what's August 6th look like for everybody? That
works for me.
I'm not available. I'm traveling.
Okay.
I'll be out of the country till the 18th, so I'll do my best to make the Zoom meetings, but I won't be able to be in person. But I don't want to hold anything back, so.
And I'm returning August 11th for my trip to the East Coast.
Okay.
August is pretty good for me, besides the last week before school starts, and we're not going that late, so I could probably make anything work.
Remind me again, Michelle, what's our first day of school?
The 3rd, thanks to Northwesco. So, what about the last week of July? I don't know when you guys, it would be nice to have everybody, but
Monday, the 29th, I have available
Would
for our workshop.
Would anyone be available before July 20th? Or I leave on the on the 20th. Oh no, the 21st. Is that too soon for the workshop?
I leave on the 24th, Marie, so I'm in a similar block as far as my big summer trip. It sort of spans that end of July, beginning of August. I'm happy to join by Zoom from afar, but if we want to do something in person, it's either got to be for me after August 11th or before July 24th.
I think it would be so cool for us to all be in person together for that. I mean, how does the week of July 15th look for folks?
That is the 1 week that I have planned.
Aw.
Yeah, I'm gone that week as well.
Yeah, what about the July 8th that week?
That's not a great week for me, but I mean, if we know what day it's gonna be, I could make it work. I mean, it's a family celebration thing. We're going away, but it's only to Lost Lake, so I'll make it work if I have to.
When do you leave during that week? Is it all the whole week?
Yeah, like the Monday through Thursday.
Okay.
Well, what about Friday?
Saturday?
Friday is good, yeah.
I'll
So
be
that'd be-
gone. I'll be gone starting.
You're gone Friday the 12th. Friday the 12th.
Summer is so fun.
I'm gone
What about the 11th?
here. Yeah, 10th and 11th I'm available.
11th would be better than the 10th for me.
Okay.
Because we
can do
could do it in
11.
the afternoon, and then maybe you could get out of packing everything up. So
Yeah.
About you, Julianne Marie?
I can do the 11th.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'd really love to be with everybody for that. 11th works.
Hopefully Avalia's available.
Yeah, and McKenna too.
and McKenna.
Mhm.
Um,
So Tiffany, like maybe the afternoon would be better on the 11th.
It would be, but I can make, yeah, actually, yes, it would be.
Me too. I'm working during the day and I can ask to leave I mean, I can take some leave and leave early, but I'd rather not break up my workday.
Well, if we did like like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon for a couple hours.
I only have to double check childcare, but otherwise, yes, I should be able to make it work.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll say July 11th for a workshop. 23rd for our training and meeting topics that come up. Okay. Sorry, I've got 3 children with all competing interests here. Oh,
And was that OSBA training midday or was it in the evening? On the 23rd, or is that set?
it's not
there-
safe.
there's nothing set, and Kristen Miles is flexible on that day, so I can send out an email and ask folks for their preference. Or if you all want to speak up now.
I'll be remote on that day, so it doesn't matter to me. I guess it's all gonna be remote, but doesn't matter to me.
Emily, Tiffany, Julia, do you have a time?
I'm pretty flexible, but lunchtime works well for me, this like midday, like as long as it's kind of a contained hour, not a many hours meeting. But I could also do evening if that's better for folks.
Remind me the day of the week for the 23rd.
So
Sorry, is that Wednesday?
it is
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I should be fine anytime then.
All right.
Work day for me. So evening is better, but I can do my very best to be flexible. I would like to be there for the training. So if evening works for folks, that's my preference.
Okay. The same as usual, like a 5:30 start? Julia,
Anytime after 4 is fine.
you want to bump it up so we're not going so late then?
Yeah.
Marie, is like a 4 o'clock okay, do you think, for Kristen?
Yeah, I think afternoons seem to be generally good times for her.
Let's just call it 4 o'clock for now then. That'll try to get us down earlier so we're not so late that day. And that gives us more time
Okay,
for the training
perfect.
part of it.
Thanks, everybody.
Any other discussion? Okay, thank you all for being here. That adjourns our meeting. Have a great rest of your June.